over Japan, as you said, potentially a direct threat to Guam. And Kim Jong-un has doubled down now. He vows to complete the nuclear program he's set upon, despite overwhelming and increasing sanctions from the West. But President Trump has a message for him, and yesterday came out with a clear statement, as he has in the past, about what will happen if he continues on this path. Take a listen.
But our aviators have given America total dominance of the air and space, no matter where we fly. Now, when our enemies hear the F-35 engines, when they're roaring overhead, their souls will tremble, and they will know the day of reckoning has arrived.
And not just talking about North Korea, obviously that's the focus, but President Trump means any enemy. Any enemy of these great United States is going to meet the full wrath of our power and our might if they reckon with us.
And the big question is, what is the day of reckoning as it pertains to North Korea? Right. I mean, they've tested 6 times. Their ICBMs are improving. They want to couple the two. We've talked about fire and fury. Now we're talking about a day of reckoning. I have no doubt that President Trump's rhetoric is serious, and he's reading from a teleprompter there. This is thought through. This is what he wants. The question is, not a lot of great options. And the longer you kick the can down the road, the worse those options.
Well, and that's exactly what U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, was saying. She says this is not about kicking the can further down the road, that we do have military options if it comes to that. Here's what she said.
They continue to be reckless, and at that point, you know, there's not a whole lot the Security Council is going to be able to do from here when you've cut 90% of the trade and 30% of the oil. So, having said that, I have no problem kicking it to General Mattis because I think he has plenty of options.
I don't think any of us have a problem giving it to General James Mattis, because he has this way of talking in this calm manner, but the words that he uses are as tough as they get. And I would say the way the administration has handled this so far is the right way, because at this point, look, going to war with North Korea is about the last option anyone wants. So having this tough rhetoric and building up the military in that region, South Korea, Japan, threatening China in that region, that is the direction we need to continue 100%. To go, because China's biggest concern is us going to war with North Korea, because that would be horrible for China. And I say this every time on the show, but China is going to continue to be the #1 player in this as we try to figure this out.
100% correct.
And China's not our friend.
Right.
China doesn't have our interests in mind.
We have a lot of people that are our friends that we have to strategically figure out a way to work with to solve a bigger problem.
But sometimes, the sanctions don't. Well, oftentimes, almost always, sanctions don't work. The diplomats fail, and it comes down to the brass tacks of military options. And that's exactly what Nikki Haley is saying here. Ultimately, we're going to have to shoot something down, a true demonstration of force, or take out Kim Jong-un and his capabilities. I mean, listen, do you want to live in a world where you have permanent nuclear blackmail, or do you want to live in a world where we're secure and we don't live under that threat? That's the tough decision that is inside this White House at this point.
It's tough.
It's a really, really tough one, but military options get worse as you wait longer, and I think that's what...
That's why every president, you go back to George H.W. Bush, every president has struggled with North Korea, because when you do lay out the options on the table, there are no good ones, and that is still the case today.
Yeah, let's face it, Kim Jong-un and President Trump aren't sitting down over lunch in Switzerland to hash this thing out. You need that dual-track strategy. You have to have the military, but, you know, look, we got to get China on board. I agree with both of you.
I got dual tracks, submarines and F-35s. There's your dual track.
All right, this is a Fox News alert. Moments ago, an arrest made in connection to the London subway attack. We will have the breaking details straight ahead.
Plus, President Trump close to making a deal with Democrats on the Dreamer program. How will his core supporters react? Governor Mike Huckabee is coming up, and we'll talk about that. We are back with a Fox News alert. British police arrest an 18-year-old in connection with the terror attack on a packed London train during rush hour. This as ISIS has claimed responsibility for the explosion that injured more than 24 people. So how do we prevent these kind of attacks on our homeland? Let's ask former CIA station chief who served in Moscow, Iraq, and Pakistan, Daniel Hoffman. Daniel, thanks for joining us this morning. So first of all, what do you make of ISIS's claim of responsibility and this arrest in this development?
Well, I would first highlight that, you know, there are a lot more unknowns than knowns in this case. Right now, British Scotland Yard and the intelligence community there is mounting a full-court press to collect as much information as they can. Was this a lone wolf attack? Was there some sort of a network behind this 18-year-old? There really are lots of questions to be answered. We do know at least preliminary forensics indicate the IED was not very sophisticated, and what that might mean is that there wasn't much additional support that was required. It might have obviated the need for a bomb maker, which was so typical in al-Qaeda operations.
Sure. Daniel, this is the 5th terror attack in the UK just this year. Describe to our viewers the depth of the problem they're facing right now.
Well, I think they are facing a significant problem inside the UK, but we are globally facing a significant problem. You know, one lesson from 9/11 was not to allow radical extremists and terrorists to enjoy ungoverned geographic space, to plot and plan against us. And even though we've done what we could to prevent that, although not very effectively in Syria in the previous administration, today terrorists enjoy ungoverned cyberspace in which to communicate and plan. And I think that's one thing that the British will be looking at in this case, is the extent to which this individual might have been radicalized. It's very hard to track people that way when they're communicating and planning in cyberspace.
Daniel, I got to ask you about that, because my first response, Theresa May's response, was that I was underwhelmed. I felt like, okay, so we're going to go to war with cyberspace. I get it, that's a tool, but it's a tool used by radical Islamic terrorists. How do you get at both the tool but also the source that is this ideology that seems to be spreading?
Well, I think that the ideology is feeding off of, certainly off of failed states. There are plenty of those, South Asia and the Middle East, and it's gaining quite a bit of traction, and individuals even in the West are finding some adherence to, you know, what is radicalizing others in those parts of the world. Certainly we need to deal with that ideological challenge, but it does put a premium on being able to collect intelligence in cyberspace and marry that up with all the other intelligence we obtain to produce really effective all-source tactical intelligence to prevent further attacks like this. I'm sure we're working closely with our British counterparts to ensure that there isn't any sort of a nexus to the United States in this case.
Daniel, and very briefly, are you confident that our authorities are on top of plots like this here in the States?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our state and local law enforcement, coupled with our intelligence community, does an outstanding job of collecting the intelligence and taking action where appropriate to keep us safe.
Well, let's hope so. Daniel Hoffman, thanks for your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Hillary Clinton sounding the alarm about President Trump.
I think this president and some of the people around him pose a clear and present danger to our country.
A clear and present danger. Really? Well, Governor Huckabee here to react to that next. Plus, this criminal...
About 25 minutes after the hour, back with some quick headlines for you. The Pentagon will allow transgender troops currently in the military to re-enlist in the next several months. The new guidance comes as a high-level panel determines how to implement President Trump's ban on transgenders in the military. The Department of Defense will submit its plan to the president by mid-February. And we are now learning a ruptured gas line may have caused the fire, injuring 14 Marines and a Navy sailor at Camp Pendleton. Officials first thought the assault vehicle may have overheated, but now they believe it ran over an underground pipeline, rupturing it and somehow starting a fire on board.
All right, President Trump still working hard to strike a deal with Democrats on DACA, despite mixed criticism from both sides of the aisle. So will his base stick with him? Former governor of Arkansas, former 2012 GOP presidential candidate, and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee up real early with us this morning.
How do we convince you to get up so early? That's what I want to know.
Well, you know, it's called an alarm clock. It's amazing what those things will do when they start going off in your ear. Not pleasant, however.
We love it, though. We appreciate it.
Let me start you off with this. Yesterday, I was in Altoona, Pennsylvania, talking to the voters about whether or not they agree with President Trump working with Democrats. Didn't know what answer I was going to get, and to a man and to a woman, his base supports him in this. Is that your experience?
It is, Todd. And by the way, it looked like you had a great breakfast, and thanks for bringing some for all of us.
It's on its way. FedEx to Arkansas.
You know, the president's base is going to stay with him, at least because they know that the Republicans are the ones who are stonewalling everything he's trying to get done in Congress right now. I mean, you know, you saw that little boy who was cutting the White House lawn. The new joke is, do you know what you get when you cross a goat with Congress? A weed eater that doesn't work. And that's kind of what we're facing, is a Congress that is getting nothing done. So people who support the president want him to get something done. And if he's willing to work with Democrats to do it, that's fine. Here's what I do think has to happen. DACA is not unacceptable. In fact, for many of us, me included, I want there to be a way for these people who came as children to be able to have a pathway. They should, and I'm for that. It needs to be done legally, not unconstitutionally like President Obama did it, but Congress needs to take that action. And the president gave them a generous 6 months to get something done that shouldn't be that hard. Now, it is important to secure the border. That's got to happen. So if he does DACA, I think he can get the border secure. If he does the border, I think he can do DACA. If he only does DACA and doesn't secure the border, I think that's going to be problematic for the president and his supporters. But I don't think that's what he's going to do.
That means Democrats have to give something up, right? Because that's how you make a deal. You get something, you give something back. So where do Democrats stand when it comes to border security? Because if that is a place where they're going to give a little bit, what is their strategy? What is their plan?
Well, he needs to sit down with them and remind them that the Republicans have the majority in the House, the Senate, and they have the White House. He is willing to give them something. He doesn't have to, but he's willing to give them something, and he wants to give them something because he wants this to be something that all Americans can embrace. But then he needs to play a little hardball. Look, in politics, I'm sorry, but sometimes you have to throw one high and inside, you know, and make them step back from the plate a little bit and know that you're serious. And then he has to tell them, guys, if you don't want something, then we'll take it all, and you'll be sitting there with your hands in your pocket. And that's where the president has got to play the hardball. I think he will do that. He's a strong deal maker, but he's not stupid, and he's not going to go and make a deal where he gives away everything and gets nothing in return.
The problem, Governor, is that Republicans haven't shown an ability to take it all, even though they've tried and multiple. I mean, it's at what point do Republicans actually receive the message, or do you think, as many have posited, that someone like Paul Ryan is, frankly, more sympathetic to the sort of open borders DACA approach than President Trump is, and is willing to work with Democrats on that because he's never been for this president's agenda? I mean, there's a real concern there.
If that's the case, then there are going to be a lot of Republicans going home next year. And frankly, if they can't get the job done, they should. Look, I said yesterday on Twitter that that little kid who mowed the lawn, Frank, maybe, you know, he's actually working. Maybe they need to put him in Congress and send the other members home, because he actually does show up and get something done. And I'm just not seeing it. And this is very frustrating. But I'm really more and more convinced that there are a lot of the Republicans in Washington who aren't afraid that Donald Trump will fail. They're afraid he will succeed.
Yep.
Yes.
And that he really will drain the swamp.
And when you go out there, I'm telling you, Governor Huckabee, you see that. People are so mad at the Republicans in Congress. Want to switch gears now to the woman who did want the White House, Hillary Clinton. Let's hear what she had to say on another network discussing our commander-in-chief.